Do you understand?
We'll save that for the other day. Alrighty. So we did this bit, right? You all know who I am. Okay. So we'll just look at SD-Wan quickly, and we'll talk about some of the components in here, just in case you're new to SD-Wan or you've never seen the architecture of SD-Wan before. But we'll just explain what some of the bits and pieces are around their names and the roles that they play as well, and the responsibilities. This will come in a little bit later when we start looking at code. So the first thing you might be familiar with, or the most thing that most network engineers are certainly familiar with, is the data plane. And this is the piece at the bottom here. And this is going to be our routers. So this could be either a virtual router, it could be one within AWS, could be in GCP, it could be a physical router, could be an ISXE device or 8000 device, Cisco 8000 device, or a mix. It could be, you know, a couple of things. You could have separate cloud, data center, campus, branch, wherever. But these participate in securing the virtual overlay in our network with a mix of different WAN transports. So one of the big things with SD-WAN is, and one of the reasons it's so popular, is you're able to have different WAN transports, such as Ethernet or say 5G, 4G, etc., Wi-Fi services, and you're able to send certain types of traffic based on applications, based on routes over those links. So you might want to have your business critical going over your MPLS link, and you might want to have your internet breakout just going straight directly out to the internet. One of the great things about SD-WAN is, you know, you're able to do that. Second piece up is the control plane, and this is called the vSmart controller. I've got on here controllers, plural, because they can be built within a HA configuration, so you can have more than one of them. But the vSmart controller is the centralized brain of the entire SD-WAN solution. And this implements policies and connectivity between our branches. So our cloud wants to talk to our data center. This is all handled by the vSmart controller. This takes care of this for us. This is this piece. The piece which most people are familiar with within SD-WAN is the vManage. Single kind of pane of glass, this is what we always refer to this as. This is the main part that you log into with SD-WAN, as we'll see. This is for, you can use this for day 0, day 1, day 2 operations. This can be built in a multi-tenant or single tenant idea. So for example, your company could have your own vManage, or you could be going to a service provider and they could be splitting that vManage as, like, say, a MSP would, and company A has a different login, company B has a different login. You can use the vManage for all of your troubleshooting, all of that stuff. And here we have our role-based access control and our APIs, which is the bit, you know, we're most interested in. But the vManage itself is going to give you visibility into the entire solution. And then finally, we have our orchestration plane, which is the vBond. Now, this facilitates the entire bring up of the entire setup, or the entire SD-WAN fabric. And this also provides things like authentication, authorization, and all of the elements within the Cisco vBond orchestrator will also provide information of how the components connect to each other as well. So if you have your vManage and it's out there, you don't want just any old router just being able to attach to it, form a tunnel to it, and then become part of that full mesh topology. Everything which is done here in the vManage is the first point of authentication for everything from certificates and the vEdge, everything in there. And it also facilitates NAT transfer as well. So when you're going out from that private network on your edge, that the piece of NAT that's done on the vBond as well.
Hey,
so there are main components. Yes, sir.
Stuart, hold on one second. Is everybody on this call? Because see, I care about making sure that you guys understand what we're presenting here. Does anybody have any questions? And look, you're amongst friends, right? So if anybody, don't feel embarrassed. Does anybody have any questions up to now about how this means or what this looks like for anybody?
I do have a question. This is Dana. So from the vManage is where, because I was just taking down notes, able to see the visibility to an entire solution then for what be going on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I wasn't sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So your first point of call is that you can log into the vManage and you can control absolutely everything from within the SD-WAN fabric, from the vSmart, vBond, all of your edge devices. You can do that from the UI of the vManage. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Good question. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
And just so everybody knows, all this logic here, this is in traditional sense, your networks really look the same way, right? So that's the part that's hard to actually overlay how this technology changes things. So just keep that in mind as you guys go through your ccna and so forth. This model right here just enhances everything we
Hey,
already
honey.
do today.
Hi, I'm still at home. I was waiting for John to get home, sweetheart.
Hold on, Dana, you want to mute?
Sure. All right.
All right, cool. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
No. Okay, we're good. I think we're good. Let's move on. Okay, I'll stop on the next one in case there's any questions on this one. So the piece that we're interested in from a programmability standpoint is the REST APIs. So vManage uses the REST architecture. So REST architecture, stateless, is a client-server cacheable communication protocol, okay? And what vManage does is it exposes the REST API, and we can use this REST API for our code, which could be anything from Ansible, Python, Go, you name it, whatever the code is. But we can also expose this to work with webhooks and integrate with third-party systems. And this might be something like ServiceNow, Thousand Eyes, might be another monitoring platform, pretty much anything. Once we've got that API exposed, we can integrate our other devices with it. This fits into what Dirk was talking about when he mentioned SDN or SASE. The SASE seems to be being spoken about quite a lot recently as well. This is where we start to integrate all of our solutions together with the REST API. Now, vManage, actually, when vManage is making changes and configuring our edge devices, such as, the devices that are in our branch, in our campus, our routers, and all this, it actually does this via netconf. So when vManage makes the change to our devices, the actual piece of information that it does, or the actual protocol that it uses, should I say, actually uses netconf, because netconf is supported on all of the vEdge devices, CSR devices, all the Cisco devices which connect in here. There's another piece to that as well, and another benefit of doing that. One, that it means that you can actually run telemetry from the edge devices as well, and this is another common thing, so that you can also not only have the visibility of all your edge devices through vManage, you can be using netconf for streaming telemetry to go into a data collection device, or some kind of streaming telemetry stack like a TIG stack or an ELK stack or something like that within there. Reason sometimes for doing that is for visibility across the networks, because of the way that vManage polls the devices for information. You might want to scale this down to, like a millisecond kind of information back from your devices. So this might be at some point, as when we say that vManage, that we're controlling all of those pieces through there might be instances where you want to talk to the devices individually as well for a solution like monitoring. Any questions on that slide?
Something I want to interject. When you guys look at this slide right here, this is going back to past conversations. This is every day. This in a couple of years, if you don't know now, in a couple of years, this is your everyday terminology right here. The REST APIs, netconf, RESTconf, webhooks. These are things that honestly, if you're not hearing them now, these are very basic fundamental concepts that no matter what technology field you're in, you're going to need to know, because it has something to do with programmability, right? So just keep that in mind, guys. So ask questions. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So
I got one.
Nope,
Go ahead. The netconf is those vManage and vEdge on SD-WAN. All those components comprised of netconf?
So do you mean the vManage, vSmart, vBond, or do you mean the edge devices?
I think looking at this is so net. I'm not sure. So netconf is how these devices are. How let's see. Netconf is the protocol of how how this exchange is happening from vManage to vEdge, right? So that is the interface. That's how it's going to push down configuration. That's how it's going to push down, do gets and what have you. Is based on netconf, right? Where
Oh, okay.
the third party, Eric. So when we do REST, everything today, net RESTconf is open, right? So when we start talking about APIs and things, most of the time we're talking about RESTconf, right? And that's coming from that's coming from third party applications down to vManage. I'm putting together a Kubernetes demo, so you'll see a lot of RESTconf and how devices work within the SDA structure going northbound and so forth. But netconf is very important because the fact that a lot of Cisco devices still talk netconf, right? So which is RPC and JSON, right? Correct me if I'm right. Okay, so
Yeah.
whereas REST APIs are basically just with the Yang model and using HTTP type configuration. So we can go over that in detail actually going forward. But go ahead. Sorry. Anybody interrupt me? But that's how the APIs, these are APIs, netconf APIs are going southbound, right? That's how we say it, southbound to vEdge and SD-WAN, which means that's pushing configuration out to those devices, right? It may in the future end up being RESTconf, but right now, if you have a third-party device, Postman, what I've been showing you guys, Postman, coming in to grab something from vManage, I'm using RESTconf. So it does that translation for you.
Now, Stuart, you said real quick, you said specific to that you may want to do it to individual devices versus all. How does that work?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, you can manage all the devices through vManage, and you don't have to log into the individual devices. But
That's
in
correct.
so in some situations, companies want to actually monitor the individual devices themselves. They don't want to go through the vManage to do the monitoring. They actually
Gotcha.
want to talk directly to the edge devices, and because they're netconf enabled, it enables you to use, programmability over the netconf transport protocol to talk to those edge devices.
Okay, gotcha.
So you wouldn't do configuration changes. Well, you really shouldn't do configuration changes because it'll put it out of whack. Okay, between what's happening with the vManage. But usually, in most of the situations that I've most commonly seen is the netconf is being used as a transport for model-driven telemetry.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you, buddy. Okay, let's move on. So, vManage, the APIs. The APIs themselves are built in a Swagger documentation, and they're actually on the vManage, the vManage device themselves. So when you log into them, you go into your vManage device, and then you put a / after your IP address or your domain name of your device, and you type API documentation. And this will bring up the API documentation. Within the UI of vManage, you can actually run and test APIs. So when you go into one of these, it will go into, you can see the show and the hide here and the list operations. This contains all of the documentation, such as the post, the get, the put, the delete, etc. It also has the payload in there, and it has instructions about what that API will do if there's certain parameters, and it will show how to form the URI, and we'll look at that in just a second. When you're in there, you can actually run the APIs. So you can actually say or click on a little button which says, run, and it will run that API within the vManage itself. So at this point, you don't have to know any code whatsoever. You can actually look at the APIs through the API documentation.
This
Yeah, go
is the
ahead,
best
Morgan.
bit of knowledge that Stuart. This
Yeah.
is that Stuart is dropping you today. And just so you guys know, we did a video last week. This right here, it goes back to my 98% rule, right? Because most of the people you have dealing with programmability are going to copy and paste and reuse stuff that other people do. But where do you find when you can't find that code, right? When you can't find that reference, where do you go? Well, just like in the NXOS, in the NXOS OS, the switches that we showed last week, you have built-in documentation. Built-in documentation you go to, and this right here can be, where you go to reference information. What I'm saying is this right here is where real engineers go to validate information, right? Instead of reusing information. So this right here is valuable. And not many people know this is here. Even though you tell them, 98% of people that listen to it won't follow the fact that this is information was put right here to make your programmability lives easier. So sorry.
No, and it's a great point. So, getting used to using the documentation and using the API documentation, being able to read this is a key part in understanding how it works. Because sometimes when people are using APIs, they're trying to do something with the API which isn't possible. They're trying to use it out of scope. Also, as well, you will find with devices, DNA Center does it, SD-Wan does it. There are APIs which aren't documented within the API documentation, which still work. Two reasons for that. One is that as devices are updated and new API documentation, new software versions are brought out, the old API calls, a lot of people might still have those in production. And what's worse is that when you update something and something stops working, those API calls will typically still work on the next version, even though they're not documented. So there is two types of API call. There is documented and undocumented. When you're building something from new, always use the documented ones. Even if you know the undocumented one exists, if you use the undocumented one, it can vanish and disappear at any time, and then that leaves you up the creek without a paddle. So only use the APIs which are in the documentation. So yeah, good. You can also find all of this information on Cisco DevNet. We spent a lot of time doing this, building the API documentation into DevNet. We have a Dev Center or microsite for SD-Wan under the API documentation. I'll show you before we close out. You can get all this documentation there as well. So I'll show you where that is. Okay. So what does our API call look like? Well, the SD-Wan URI structure looks like this. We have our protocol in this case, which is HTTPS. This was the protocol as which we actually send the data between client and server. When I say server, I mean vManage. Client being me, in this instance, server being vManage. We resolve it to the host and port, HTTPS, or the actual host, in this case, vManage. Natively, SD-Wan runs on port 8443. That's its actual port, so you will tag that onto it. Even if you don't tag it on, when you load the vManage device, it will automatically load up with 8443 anyway. You can make calls over 443, no problem at all, but they will translate automatically. SD-Wan will turn those into 8443 as well. The next piece that we have here is the resource, and this is the location of the data or object of interest. So here we are actually looking at the category of data services. And within data services, we have device. And let's just take those first two words there, data services. And within the data services are our devices. And our devices are our edge devices, our V-Edge or our C-Edge, CSR devices. And then what we would have in there is in this case, we've got BFD, state, and then device. If we was just to run that, data services, device, BFD, state, / devices, this would bring back all of the devices and the BFD state of those devices. Here in this example, this is just a GET request, and the safest request of what you can do when using an API is a GET request. A GET request doesn't make any changes, perfectly safe, run it as much as you like. You're not going to break anything, but it's a really valuable learning curve to start using the GET URI to start pulling that information back, looking at it, see how it's structured, and examining it. But what we can do here is we can add parameters onto the edge of this. Now, these are often optional. As we mentioned, if we just left this at device before the question mark, it would pull back however many devices, 8, 20, 100, 200, however many devices we have attached to our SD-WAN fabric. But here we are looking at one specific device. So then we put the question mark, we have the device ID. Now that is the device ID of a V-Edge device, and we'll see this a little later when we start bringing information back. Because there's a couple of different ways that you can reference devices. Think about the device ID like a management ID. And then what we do is we have to manually add that IP address on the end of it. And if we was to run this with the parameter in red there on the right-hand side, was to run this part, we would pull back just one device. So this is now how, by using the additional parameters, we can use this to filter, clarify the requests, single this down into one data. Imagine looking at all of this data, which is going to come back to us in a JSON format. It's going to be really verbose. If it's 200 devices, it's going to pull back a lot of information. Drilling through that with your eyes is going to be quite tiresome, hunting something out or doing a control find to actually find it. But we can just narrow this down to this one device. We might only be interested in looking at one device for whatever reason, because we're interested in statistics. Any questions on this one?
Actually, I wanted to throw something in here that is what the URI or URL that he's got there. That's standard HTTP, HTTPS URL syntax. So, like the next time you're looking at a website or buying something online, look up at the top bar and see all of that stuff, because those are things that you can use in other contexts. That's standard stuff.
Ah, that's good. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Stuart, question. If you put in an IP address and you're just pulling down the information for a single device, is that pulling like the running config, or is that giving you everything that's inside of that device from a parameter perspective?
You could do that. Yeah, you could actually pull the full show run in this very similar fashion. But in this state, imagine this, that you're doing, say, something like a show BGP command on your box, or you're looking at some global parameter by forward directional, BFD standing for. In this case, what it would do was it would be pulling this one piece of information back. That's called a single piece of information about BFD. But to your point, if you change the URI structure, yes, you could do that specifically to one device. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, good. That's good. Okay.
Dana, did you have a question? I thought. Okay, maybe not. Okay.
Okay. No worries. Okay. So we looked at anybody? Okay. So with the APIs, they're listed into categories. We have changed the device configuration, we have device action, device state, device real-time monitoring, NMS administration, and NMS troubleshooting. When you look at the API documentation, it's all grouped into these 6 different areas. So it makes it easy when looking at the documentation and what's capable using programmability and APIs. This is all built into these individual categories. So it makes using the API documentation a lot more simple, a lot more easy to use. When you become familiar with the documentation, you can think, okay, I need to go into the device state area and I need to look into this category to get my information. I'm going to be changing things. I'm going to look at things like device configuration or device action. I'm going to be looking into 2 of those. So they're just the different categories of API: reading information, getting information, changing information, monitoring, administration, and then also troubleshooting as well.
Stuart, just to follow, so the previous screen that you said will get device will basically bring us to this screen where you can actually start implementing the APIs you want to incorporate them to the
I can show you that. Yeah, I can show you that. I can show you all the different collections. Yeah, it comes down to just these 6 things, but I can show you those in the vManage. Let's take a look. Actually, that's a great point. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump into the demo part that I've got lined up now. Let's have a look. So I need to go to Firefox. Let's have a look. Where's it gone? Here we go. So I'm in the DevNet sandbox right now. Actually, let me show you the sandbox first, because that'll make a lot more sense if I show you this first. So this is the DevNet sandbox, and this is the SD-Wan topology within here. Let me just zoom in here because it's a bit small. Here we go. All right. This is a reservable sandbox, which means I've got full administrative access over this. Right, let's walk through this. So up here, vManage, we know what that does. vSmart, check. vBond, yeah, absolutely. So we have these run on 3 VMs. This is all a virtual environment for us. The rest of this is powered by Cisco Modeling Labs, CML, or as it was formerly known, Viral. And then we have all of our devices. Now this is split down into 3 sites. So we have our site 1 down here. Now, for example, we could call this our data center, for example. And in here, we've got 3 devices sat behind here. We've got just a server, 2 different servers, a desktop, and then just another. It is generating traffic. This is going up into one of our edge devices up here. Look, these 2 here. Then what we have is a site 2, which could be our branch or our campus, and then we've got site 3, which could be just a retail store or something like that, just hanging out there. They all have the same amount of devices sat behind them. And the reason why we have devices sat behind them is so that this can look like a real world environment. You can hop onto these servers and start sending traffic from site here, all the way across to this site here. The way that we built this sandbox is quite unique. Each site has 2 links because we wanted to make it look like a proper customer environment. So we have a WAN link, which would be just directly out to the internet, and then we have an MPLS link. Both of those links are forming tunnels into the vManage, into the solution, to create a full mesh topology. So this is our entire, what the entire sort of thing looks like. Each site 2 links. Each site has 2 hosts behind it to make it look like a proper site. So when you log in to the vManage dashboard, this is the first thing you're going to be presented with, and you'll see that we have here. This tells us how many devices we've got. We've got the vManage, just one of those, vBond, one of those, vSmart, and then vEdge. You can click on these. Tells you the IP addresses, what the device models are, versions, system IP, reachable. We talked about that single pane of glass idea. You can see absolutely everything from here. You can even go into the devices from here, click on them, see bits of information, click on them here. You can get real-time data from it, the device dashboard. You can even SSH into the devices as well. It'll bring up a little, I'll click on that and you'll see it. And what it'll do is it'll bring up a little terminal. Come on, chug, chug, chug. Takes a little time. And you can, log into those devices if you wanted to do, manual troubleshooting yourself. No worries. A couple of different options, all the things here, like, monitoring things, geography, network, alarms, events. Everything's in here that we spoke of as well. All of the bits and pieces, everything you need in here. And you'll see here that we've got these traffic generators here, and you can see down here just on the application aware side where we've got this fake traffic running in the sandbox environment, and you can see the sort of the average latency and loss and all of the traffic which is moving over this entire platform. So instead of logging into the devices, you can see all of this again, from just logging into the vManage. This is extremely powerful. So I promise you the API documentation, right? So if I do API docs, DOCE, I can't spell docs, API docs. Dun, dun, dun. This takes a little time sometimes to load this when you go into it, because it's loading all of this information in. Come on. Have you noticed things always take longer on demos? There we go. So when we log into this, this is exactly what we saw on the screenshot with everything here. And you can see here, let's look at this one, device inventory. And you can run all of these things, from the device itself. You can get all of the information. I think this is probably a bad one actually to look at. Let me look at device actions. You can reboot the device. Loads of bits. So let's look at one that we can just use. Device discover. I'm looking for a fairly simple one. Let's have that's a get filter, get list. No, let's have a look at another one. Configuration. Let me scoot up here. One that's just a nice low hanging fruit one. Device. Scoot down configuration. Configuration policy. You'll see this is pretty big as well. Pretty big. Let's keep scooting down. Where's the one I'm looking for? Diagnostics. Nope. Allocation. Tenant management. Tenant status. Device actions. The template. Let's look at this one. So you can go into this and we're going to look at template feature, and this is just a get command. And so what we can see here is this is going to retrieve the template list from the devices. And the template in SD-WAN terms is this is the feature template, and the feature template is the features that are on our edge devices. And we can look at all of these features. And what you see here is the model schema, or what this would be is your JSON payload. So if you was writing this in Python and you wanted to send that JSON payload over, you can just simply copy this out of here quite easily. And what you'll see then at the bottom is the HTTPS status code. So we've got 200 for success, 400 for bad request, 403 for forbidden, and then 500 internal server error. But as promised, to try it out, we can click on this and we can try it out within here. So you'll see this request URL that we mentioned before, the URI, and you can see how it's inserted that port 8443. It's looking at data services again. It's using the template and the feature, and this is all the information pulled back in JSON here. We see from the fact that we've got a 200 that this is cool, everything's working, hunky-dory, lovely. This information is, is pretty big. We can look here and this will show us template ID, descriptions, the device type. Last updated, factory reset, template version, conflict type, XML. And this was when it was created on. There's a lot of information in here. This is why we go into the kind of the granular piece. And the last bit of information that we see here is actually the response headers, the headers which are sent back from the device themselves. So if there was errors or something like that, you would see those in the response header. Before we move on to something else, any questions on this piece?
Yeah, can you go up for a second, Stuart?
Keep going, Web.
No, just, I'm sorry. Can you go up on the page a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, buddy, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. So not many people are asking questions. So wait, no, I just want to show them the API. Go down a little bit, the response body.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, buddy.
So if you guys take number one, the question I want to answer that nobody's asking, right? What would I do with this, right? So, for example, here's a situation. Let's say we'll pick a parameter here. Let's say template description. I'm just making, let's say someone says we need a template description. Maybe I'm a large service provider. Maybe I'm managing a ton of these, right? What I would do is this is my API, the request URL. That's the API. So I would write code to say, look, go ahead and run a get on the features, right? And then I want to grep my key value pair of, or the key, which is, what do we say here? Template name or whatever, template description, whatever you want to say here. And we will go ahead and we will grep that and we can parse it and we can change it and roll it back in. But what you're looking here is this is an API giving the example of what you would get back when you use the API and the usage of that would be to parse that information to do whatever. Maybe you're going to check and make sure that a certain key or a certain place in here is configured properly, or maybe you're going to change the configuration. I'm just going along with this theme of what we used here as an example. So that's exactly how you're going to look at this. To go back last week when I showed you Postman, I would essentially do this. I would essentially copy and paste this URL up here, put it in Postman, and that's another way to execute that, right?
Yep,
Then when you start looking at Python and other stuff, now you see why you need Python, which would actually be another place you can execute this get from. And Python would give you the ability to parse that information to, let's say you want to create a report based on what came out. It would take that information, rearrange it, and put this in a way that and export it out of a script that you would want to see it, or other things. But I'm trying to give you an example of this is what you guys have to be used to doing and seeing from here in the future in technology, because everything that we're doing, every device, every bit of technology we're working on is moving to this model, which is a model of programmability. So there's a lot of power in this stuff. So
yeah, I was going to say one other thing, which is, all right, so you're looking at the URL there, and you're looking at the response body. You need to know when you look at that, go, oh, that's coming back as JSON. This is the kind of stuff that you could take this and put this in. I mean, shoot, you could execute this stuff with curl inside of a shell script or a batch file or something like this. But it's sometimes you don't always need to know every single thing that went into it. But when you're troubleshooting stuff, if you know what the heck's going on under the hood and you can look at these things, that gives you the ability to go, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't look right, or shoot, something's messed up in my JSON syntax there. Those are all very useful things to know.
So Derek, I got a question. So are these templates configurable, or can you add
no
information to them?
Oh yes, so that's what I'm trying. So this right here is a configure. This is what's configured in this device already. So when he runs the get, this is what's configured, right? So you didn't want to run a configuration one, but like for example, is there anything editable that we can edit in this config? That we can show, like, or maybe there's a.
So I guess what I'm asking, Derek, is if I'm looking for a specific piece of information back from the edge device,
right,
that may not be readily available in the library, can I go in and modify it to pull that piece of information back?
Absolutely.
Say out of a template like this. Okay.
Absolutely. It depends. It depends on what you're editing, right? But give me something. Let's say an IP address, right? I'm careful to find examples that will work nicely with SD-Wan. But let's. You have an example, real fast?
Just looking.
Stuart, maybe something we can set
in the template. No, we can't change the template on there because it'll just break everything coming up.
Are there any posts in here that you can do? There's no posts.
Oh yeah, I can show you some posts. I can do that on the next. I can do that on the next piece. Yeah. I can show on the next piece. Yeah.
Just to give an example, right? And I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I tell you what we'll do is we'll move ahead and we'll just look at Postman, because this, as you were talking about Post and Postman, this segments really nicely into this.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay. Here you go. You see. So Derek was mentioning that you were talking about Postman, and this is a really good way of showing the API now in action and how this works. So I've already imported my Postman collection. You just go up to this little tab up here which says import, and then I've imported my folder, and I can show you where I got this from as well. I've built in an environment up here. So if you click on the little eye, you can see my environment, and this is the username credentials of my vManage, my password, my port, all of those things. That's all you need in your environment. Okay. So to start making the API calls, there was mentioning a post here. So the post start making the API calls, anything later of SD-Wan, anything later than version 19.2, you needed to get a cookie and a token. Previously, before then, it was just get the cookie But after 19.2, it's now a two-step process. You need to get the cookie and the token. And this is where the post request comes in up here. So you'll see that this looks familiar to us now, right? Can you all see that? Is that too small? There you go. That made that a bit bigger. This looks, familiar to us now. It's that URI that we had before, but the environmental file is passing in here. You'll see the 10, 10, 20, 90 IP, and it's pulling it in from that environment, hover over the port. You'll see it's pushing in that port 8443. And the first thing we do is this post using the J security check. And we have to authenticate with the API to start with. Otherwise, anybody who don't do the authentication or, log into this, anybody's, basically going to be pulling information back from our device, and we don't want that. So if we just click the send piece now, we get back the 200 OK. So we're absolutely right. We get back our cookie, which comes in the form of this session ID here. Here's the value, the domain, everything that we need to know, how many milliseconds it took, all the rest of it. So that window it was talking about making a post request. This is actually making a post request to the device to actually get this information back. The next stage is collecting our token. So once we've done the authentication, we move down to token, and you'll see here in our URI, this is a GET request. We're still passing the same IP, same port, but now we're going into the data services /client/token. We can pull this away, give this a little click. Our token appears. We get a 200 OK. Our token is good for 30 minutes as long as there's activity. It'll go on longer, but it would actually be valid for 24 hours. Yeah, you could keep using this. So if you had this on an external device or you use that being managed for a third-party API integration, you get 24 hours on this particular token. So you can see all of that being pulled back. So we have to go through this two-step process first, both the post request and then the GET request. Simple as. Now let's get the devices. I want to find out all of the devices which are on my SD-Wan fabric. So when we looked at that slide and we had data services device, and then we had BFD, and then we had state and devices. This is a little bit shorter. What we have is data services and then device. Simple GET request, easy peasy, and this pulls this back again in JSON format. And we scoot through this. This is pretty verbose. You can see the little scrolly thing in the corner. It's like really, really small here. But this will tell you everything about the device. I'm going to jump down to see a device that we've seen the name of. So I'm just going to scoot really quickly. Scoot, scoot, scoot. Here we go. I'm going to highlight this out. Here is our vManage device. We see our IP address, system IP, host name, reachability, status, personality, device type, time zone, loads of stuff here. Domain ID, last dated ID, board serial ID. You might be doing some kind of information gathering pieces back, or what's the serial number of this device. Site longitude or latitude, that might come in if you've got this spread across a global network and one of your devices is in London, you've got another one in Manchester, one in New York. They're all over the place. Local system IP, and look right here, device ID. So that when we queried that other, oh no, that's I think I'm looking at the vSmart now, aren't I? Yeah, it's gone down to the vSmart. Let me go back up, sorry. Device ID, here we go. When we was looking at that before, and we were looking at that individual device, we were referencing the device ID. As Derek was mentioning before, that when you do that first GET command, generally you would do your first, if you were looking into this for the first time, for example, you would pull back all that information about these devices, and then you would add those parameters on here to make this even more granular. So you're pulling information back about individual devices themselves. Is that all good?
Yeah, individual devices. I was just gonna get ready to say, can you do like a control F on that ID and bring that up? Just you can.
Okay. You could do. Yeah. Okay. You could do.
Thank
you.
And
I believe no, that's a good question, but I believe. Let me take a look at doing this. I don't often do this in Postman, so I think it's a question mark, and then I've already got it built in here. Look, I've already got one here. So this is a get, and I'm going to pull down, and we could actually go for what was the vmanage? So the vmanage was .1, right? Change that just to .1. Yeah, absolutely. Pull that information. You can actually copy it out, all of that information. You can look at it by a little magnifying glass. Let's send this one and see if we can get this information. Yeah, we go. So now we're only pulling, yeah, absolutely, pulling in all the information back about the vmanage and then the vmanage only. So if we scoot all the way down, this is quite small, look, and it stops right there. But the information you get back is more, yeah, absolutely more local there.
All right, thank you.
No, that's good, buddy. Okay, this is great in Postman. Did you know you can do this in Postman? Click on the code. Look here. And this is what this would look like in Python. I can't tell you how many.
Motion.
Yeah,
Derek.
I've done that a couple of times, but I feel like I feel awful inside showing people the request library. I did showing people. I feel awful showing them that. So, but yeah, I showed them that.
I use the request library a lot. Yeah.
Oh, do you?
Derek went over that a couple
Oh, do
times.
you? You use the request a lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I use that an awful amount. Yeah. Okay. Derek, have we got time to look at some Python code? I see we're running.
What do you say, guys? Does anybody want to see Python?
Yeah, sure. I'll see it. I'll take a look at it.
Let's do this.
Thank you.
Okay. No, it's cool. So I'm going to show you everything we looked at now, for everything now in Python, this whole thing in code. And because we've kind of layered this up, right? We've looked at this from a UI standpoint. We've looked at it through the API documentation standpoint. We've gone into Postman. And now we're going to look at this completely code. So this will all make, I promise, will all make 100% sense to you, or exactly what I show you now. So here we go. This is the authentication piece that we've just looked at. You see the first call that I made here on line 9, where we did the J security check and we looked for our J username, J password, which was admin Cisco 12345. So we passed the credentials in here in the security check to get back our cookie. Okay. I've just built a couple of things in here. These aren't necessary, but it was just, I built them in case I passed the wrong username and password in here. My code would say failed, but when I'm successful, it will go into this next statement and it will say that it's going on to the next stage of getting the token piece. So this all makes sense using that URI that we saw first in Postman, the username credentials, and then building that all up together in this one line here on line 13. This post request with the URL, the URL here, SD-Wan URL, and then the credentials. Okay. The next stage that we go on to is to get the token starting on line 25. So we've been successful in getting our cookie and we've gone on to get our token. And it does exactly the same thing. It gets this and it stores it. And then we go through the same piece here where it checks for a 200 OK. If it's anything but a 200 OK, the code will fail and we'll get a little message to say, hey, your code's failed. When it's successful, we will get the print token success. So this should all make great sense because we've looked at all of these pieces, but just from a different standpoint. We looked at it through the UI and we looked at it through Postman. These URI calls here looks familiar, right?
It just looks a lot cleaner right there.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And how'd you pull that? How'd you pull that up in Python again? Go back.
How did I pull it up? Okay, yeah, absolutely. So what I did was,
I missed it.
No. That's cool, buddy. I'm on the authentication here.
Yep.
I went over to here where it says code on the right-hand side. Press on code. There it is.
Oh,
see
gotcha.
this line 3?
Yeah.
The only difference with Postman is adding its own headers in here. Okay. This is the bit that we have to do some magic with when we go into Python. But import requests, exactly the same. This URL here, exactly the same. The response, post request, and it's in this part here, it's printing the response request. So it's
Gotcha.
actually printing that. I'll show you what that looks like when we get into this code. So let's jump back into this one again.
Okay,
So
yeah.
this is
Thanks, guys.
same. No, it's same line again. I'm going to run this. Okay. So here we go. So let's see. So Python, and then SD-Wan, and then it's auth. This piece of code is just doing the authorization. Okay. So here we go. We see the login success, and I'm printing this as 200. Okay. Typically, when I'm writing code for this, I like seeing this response because I like to see what kind of, something's coming back. Because if I see the, a wrong credential, it's just going to get flagged for me right here. It's going to print exactly what that HTTP error is here. But we've been successful. We're going on to get the token, and we were successful. It's given us the token back. So, happy days. Everything's good. We've got our token. But that's all this piece of code does. All it does is get the token. If I was to comment this out, line 29, let me just save that. Scoot back up again. Just press the up arrow here in my shell. Here's my token again. I can actually print the token onto my screen. So this token, was similar when we looked into Postman and we went back over here where we got get token. We got a token in this API call as well. My Python code is a completely separate API call, so hence it's going to be a separate cookie, separate token, but exactly the same thing. We can validate, we can look at that token in the code as well. It's just within the code. I'm just choosing not to show that, so I'm just going to hide that as well because I don't need to see that token when I'm doing it. That's all sense. So I'm going to take you one step further now, and you're not going to believe how far you have come. If I showed you this code right at the start of the meeting, your head would be, exploding right out there. Why are you showing us all this code? This code doesn't mean anything to me. But we've layered it up, right? We've built it up slowly. So let's jump into our get devices. So this is something that I tell a lie, not that piece of code. Let me jump into this piece of code here. Here we go. Okay. So you've seen line 9 before. I've shown you it like 5 times now, loads of times. With all of this, this, you're experts in this. Line 25, you're experts in this. This is the token, no problem. So we go to the next piece, and this is the new piece. We're now going one step further. This is our third step. We are getting all the devices which are attached to the fabric. And we did this in Postman, okay? Jump back into Postman. Get fabric devices. Yeah, I modified that when we're doing it, but this is what it looked like. Data services, devices, it printed everything in JSON. Jump back into the code. The exact same on line 43. Let me make that a bit bigger. There we go. Line 43. Device URL, IP address, data services, devices. We're sending that URI, that API call to say fetch all of the devices. And when saying this to vmanage, sending this to vmanage, send me all the devices that you've got. Everything. All of them here. That's all you need to know right here on this line. And then we're taking that response, because this is a get, the device URL right here, and we're loading this response in JSON. We're taking this back in the JSON response here. And I'm going to do something really clever with this, because if we pulled all this device information back, this would be huge, right? It'd be really big. We saw it. We saw it in Postman. It was here. It was all of this. Send this again, right? All of this information here. This huge piece of information. Some of this isn't, I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in columns. Titles, no, not interested. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually taking that JSON and I'm pulling out the pieces that I want. I want the reachability. I want the device status. I want the device ID, which we spoke about earlier. I want my site ID. I want to know what the device is. I want to know my version. I want to know the certificate that's on there, that it's valid, that it's licensed, it's happy to be within my SD-Wan fabric. And I'm just printing that out. And I'm using a Python library called tabulate just to help me do that. Tabulate does all of the heavy lifting. It saves me, doing lots of stuff with like regex and doing, lots of magic with bits and pieces. Tabulate will do that for me. So let's see it work. Let me go onto here. I'm just going to clear this. Whoopsie, can't type clear. Here. Okay. So Python, SD-Wan code. Let's walk through it. We got the login success 200. From 200, if 200 appears, we know we can get the token. We're getting our token. We're success in getting our token, so we go to our next stage. Our next stage is getting all of the attached devices. And as promised, we wanted host name, reachability, status, device IP, site ID, host type version, and certificate. And tabulate is just pushing it into this table format for me. Normally this would come back in JSON, but to make this a little bit easier on the eye, we push it into tabulate. And we see all of this information. We see all of our host device names, our reachability, our status, our device IP, our site ID, our host type. See, we've got vEdge Cloud and then VSR. And you know what all of these devices are now. Excuse me. You know that this is the vBond. You know what it does. You know what the vSmart does. You know what the vManage does. You know what the CSR does. You know what device IP means, the version of the device which is running, and that this device has a valid certificate on it, which means if the certificate is valid, tunnels are able to form, and it's able to come up on our network. So I'll jump back into the code again. We'll look at the code one more time. We'll just go through it. Walk through it one more time. What do? We passed our username and password in with this API call, with the JSecurity chat using the username and password. This gave us a cookie, which enabled us to go on to the next stage of our code to get our token. And our token is used. So if I run this code again, I will be getting the same token back. That same token will come back to me. Then we went down to line 43 and we grabbed all of the devices. This is that piece we talked about with vManage when we said single pane of glass. I don't have to log in to however many devices anymore. One API call to the vManage to save me logging into what could be, I was talking to American Express America the other day, 5,000 devices. Now Derek, I mean, he's fast on the CLI. He's like a skilled surgeon on the CLI. I bet I could write an API call quicker and he could log into 5,000 devices. It wouldn't be by much. It'd only be a couple of seconds, Derek, I know. But this is the way that we can move forward with this, by pulling all of this information back really simplistically through just an API call. Does anybody have any questions on this bit? I've covered a bit right there.
I like to say something, and this is for everybody that's on this call, anybody who's looking at this video, what have you. What Stuart just dropped in less than an hour is a lot of valuable information that I don't even know if you guys appreciate this, right? So here's in a nutshell, right? Everything he just showed you shows you, he taught you programmability. He even walked through the script, right? This is information that's out there. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're sharing this on GitHub, right? Right, Stuart?
Oh, I'm going to give you all of this as a leading present, buddy.
So all this stuff right here, this is what you need to learn. This is how if you went and Googled SD-WAN positions out there, everything he just showed you is within the job description for someone who's doing programmability with SD-WAN. This right here, if you knew, and you're going to have a copy of the video, if you guys knew everything he taught you, you guys are what's in demand. Everything. There's nothing that he left out, really. You guys are in demand in the market. He showed you where to find the information. He showed you how to use the information. He showed you 2 different mechanisms. If you guys understand how we use Postman, that's something I think I failed in showing you last week, but he just successfully showed you how to leverage Postman to validate your APIs. And then from that next at the next aspect of validating your APIs, he showed you how to use those APIs in a Python script using request library to do exactly what he did and Postman. This is brilliant. This is really flawless information that any one of you, if you went back and read this, then you don't even need training in this anymore. He gave you all the C's to be an SME and SD-WAN, and I'm just blown away. So guys, just suck this knowledge in. This right here is valuable information. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
No, you're more than welcome, buddy.
Anybody have
So
any
let's
questions?
I'll share where we're getting this from, but feel free to ask questions. Absolutely, let's do that. Cool.
You guys are so quiet. Tanu, are you still there? Tanu, are you around? She's so quiet. Okay. All right. Let's go. Let's do it.
So you want to try this? Absolutely. It's one thing.
I'm there. Sorry, guys. I am.
Yeah, you're there. Okay. She's there. That's good.
I'm
right.
there. Sorry.
Are you
one
good?
thing?
I'm
Are you
sorry.
good? No, look.
Yeah, I am. I'm just thinking of how I'm going to reserve the sandbox and try this out. Yeah, it is.
Good. That's what I'd say.
Well, one question for you, Stuart. One question for you.
Yes, sir.
So are you fully VPN in the sandbox, or you're leveraging your laptop? Are you running these scripts directly? You run them directly from your laptop?
Oh no, yeah. I mean, this is all the scripts are running on my laptop, and this sandbox is in San Jose. And obviously, I'm in England, and this is in San Jose. Yeah, so yeah, I'm running into this. And again, to your point, I'm going straight into this vManage device here over the VPN. So this would be an exact same situation. We're all in this crazy situation where we're all working from home now, and I'm just using the VPN just to go to my vManage device to pull all the information back about this network. Yeah, everything's running locally. Yeah.
I don't really want to get into, and I'm trying to motivate you guys. I don't want to get into the salary requirements for SD-WAN SME, but they're fairly high, right? But
yeah,
again, you guys have access to master this, and to give you, we talked about stories how I ramp up on technologies really fast, but it's based on having access, which access is here, right? And having training. And what Stuart just gave you, he gave you a consolidated 2 weeks in training. He saved you time. There's nothing left over as far as what you need to learn regarding SD-WAN and programmability. So I'm really excited with this. So go ahead, Stuart.
Oh, buddy. Let's jump into this next one. So the Postman Collection, if you pop over to DevNet Code Exchange, we host everything within Code Exchange. One of the reasons that any demo that I do, whether I do it here, whether I do it at Cisco Live, it doesn't matter, as an advocate, I want to give somebody to take away. It's one thing to watch, but the best exposure, the best experience you'll get is doing this yourself, running it yourself, taking this and doing it in your own time, whenever you wish. So you can download the Postman Collection on Code Exchange. Just jump into Code Exchange on DevNet. Just search for you can just search for SD-WAN, and this Postman Collection will come straight up, and then you can grab this collection. The Python code, same place. Here it is. Getting started with SD-WAN. It's in Code Exchange. Clone the repo. If this will, you can go over to this itself. Actually, it says it here. Look, I'll do it here. It says exactly what to do. Install the requirements, and then it walks you through the process that we talked about, the API process. All of this here, and then finally down to this piece here where there's a little video, and it shows me printing off, the whole 9 yards is here. Everything's right here. So you can clone this code right now, reserve the sandbox, and do it straight away. You can do it straight away. Once you've got this code, run it, see it working, and break it. Go into the code and start removing parts. Change the password, for example. It's a great way of seeing it break straight away. Just change the admin password to admin15 or something. It doesn't matter what you change it to. Change it, see it break, get it to work. Start pulling little bits out of the code. Break the code down. For me, when I wrote this code, you see that I wrote it in sections. I wrote the auth section first, tested this, made it work. I had the other piece here. This was the just the get device. This is what this looks like, just in a single, 4 or 5 line piece of of code. And then I just glued them all together into this final piece, just squished them all together. And that's how you build up that code, one step at a time, ladder it up until you're getting the information back that you want. Code's there, sandbox is there.
Yeah, I wanted to throw one thing in here is
Yes, sir.
when you're using Postman there, you're kind of using that to interactively build the queries that you want, and that's quicker to do than if you're doing it in the code and you're running stuff. So it's like you can sit there and kind of bang on that interactively in Postman, and then once you've got it where you want, then you move that piece over into your Python code.
Exactly, and that's why I use Postman. And I was saying, I've been doing this for a little while now. You'll never hear me say that I'm an expert. That word will never come out of my mouth. And if it does come out of my mouth, feel free to punch me in it, because I shouldn't say it. I am such a means of the word. But I use Postman all the time. Absolutely use Postman all the time, because, especially when I got started with SD-Wan, SD-Wan was integrated into devnet, and we started building the samples out there for consumers and for the exam certification. And I've been doing SD-Wan now since, I think, 2019. Yeah, probably 2019. The first thing I did was start doing my API calls in Postman. Anytime I'm using an API for the first time, Postman. All the time. Yeah.
Hey guys, this is a teaching moment and Rich will probably agree with me. If I ever ask an engineer, I always ask anybody, rate yourself in a certain skill from one.
I was going to bring this up.
I say, rate yourself.
Do you understand